Welcome back to the Shine Within podcast. Monica Rodgers is a coach, podcaster, and creative guide who empowers women to break free from the trance of unworthiness and reclaim their authenticity. Through storytelling, spiritual practice, and intentional creativity, she helps women embrace self love, express their truth, and step into their power as leaders and creators of change. That is beautiful. I love what you do, and I'm just really excited to speak with you. We were just talking about that moon last night,
And it's still
and
activating
it's still
me.
activating me too.
Hmm.
A lot of
Yep.
things in common. So I'm really thrilled to have you on my show, Monica. Thank you so much.
Oh, Gina, it's an honor. And I love what you do as well. Likewise, I just love your whole vibe. You're radiant. You're beautiful. I love the name of your podcast. This is great.
Thank you. Now, you've had such a powerful journey from public relations and running a retail empire to walking away from a traumatic marriage and stepping fully into your purpose. What
Mm.
was that turning point that actually led you to reclaim your authenticity and live aligned with your truth?
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. It was about 16 years ago. I didn't even know what to call it at the time, but now I understand that it was a dark night of the soul.
Mm,
And I think, a lot of people or a lot of us women are conditioned in the world to be what I call the four P's: pretty, pleasing, polite, and performative. And none of us really can see the construct or the programming in place that has us relinquish our own sovereignty and our own power to become these four P's, to basically perform our way through and try to prove ourselves. There's another one, and like another P, proving, right? So it's like I was doing all the things that they say we women can do and had gotten to the top, like I said, like of this retail empire. At the time I was building a parenting brand, and I was retailing and wholesaling all over the country. I had been in the New York Times, I had been in InStyle magazine, I had been on the Today Show, I had done all of the things, and I had never been more miserable. I had never been more overwhelmed, and I had never been more exhausted in my life. And I I didn't realize that I had built an empire on quicksand because every foundation wasn't authentic and honest. It was all coming from this place of trying to prove myself, trying to perform, trying to be all things to all people. And it was never going to work out. And so they often say, we have these astrological cycles in our lives. And I can't tell you so much about that, but I do know that it very much coincided with kind of like Pluto, who's the god of the underworld. And for me, the underworld is really the unconscious. It's all of the unconscious programming. And so, in order to confront all of that programming and also kind of become curious, like, how did I, instead of kind of going into my normal mode of beating myself up for all of the ways I wasn't, kind of like able to rise to the occasion yet again or overfunction yet again, I started getting curious. And as I started getting curious, I heard a very firm, quiet, calm voice that started kind of talking to me in a way that I thought, like, well, what the heck is this? It wasn't the voice of, the voice of punishment or the voice of guilt or the voice of shame. Even though those were there, this was a different voice. And as I started to tune in, I started to like actually question the voice. And one of the things I remember asking the voice was, well, what happens if, like, I was so unhappy and I thought, I have to keep up this facade in order to keep this going. And the voice was like, no, let it fall apart. And I thought, like, well, if I let it fall apart, nobody's gonna, who's gonna pick up the pieces? And the voice was kind of like, that's the point. Like, say yes to the mess is what the voice said. And that from that point forward, and I should also tell your listeners that it culminated. It was a tremendous amount of things all at the same time. It was kind of like the universe had probably been whispering me to me for a long time, but I'm one of those people. I used to be up until now, that needed the universal 2x4 to kind of come along and like really knock me on my butt. And so it did. I was actually in bed with an autoimmune condition, which is was Hashimoto's, which I also healed. But it was, losing my marriage, losing my business. It culminated in this massive kind of disaster, right? There were so many disguised gifts in the disaster, but I first had to come home to myself. And one of the very first things I had to do was hear the voice of self-loathing that had been talking to me for so long and had been really the internalized voices of the many teachers I had, some of the, traumas in my childhood. And as you know, we all internalize that. And you and I shared a story where we both shared kind of that early journey, even in our 20s, starting to recognize like, oh my gosh, I don't like myself. I actually hate myself. I used to say that to myself in the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing. And wow, what a journey though, right? Like Earth is a school. We're
Earth is
learning.
a school.
We're definitely learning. And it's true, because of the conditioned world, we were told by our parents, even, our schools, even our friends back then who are so-called friends, really like frenemies.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not good enough. Oh, don't cry. Toughen up. Get over it. But we never got a chance to feel those feelings. And I think that's why we're here also, is to experience being human, which includes
That's right.
feeling. And then we felt unworthiness, of course, and didn't have that self-love. And I know you often talk about disrupting is it called the trance of unworthiness? Yeah,
Yes.
can you go
Yeah.
ahead and explain what that means and how this invisible force keeps women from stepping fully into their power?
Yeah. I mean, it's so from a very young age, I was somebody who was raised in the Catholic religion. And this is not a slight on, any type of religion. I think religion has its place. But I was never given what I call spiritual autonomy. And that means to me, like I wasn't able to choose my own path or my own practice or my own form of ritual. And I think that that's so important for us as women. And I remember being in church growing up and the preacher kind of being at the front of the church talking about the story of Adam and Eve. And so many of us have been programmed beginning with that biblical story of the sins of Eve. And to me, I thought as this 6-year-old indignant girl who was full of fire and full of herself, I thought, oh my gosh, like I looked around the church thinking the women were going to stand up in protest. And they were just standing there with their eyes wide open. And I realized, oh, they're not even home. They're not even in their bodies. They've disassociated. And then I started watching and recognizing, and again, from a really young age, in fact, I could even tell in photographs looking back, I could look through this box of family photographs and tell you who was in their body and who wasn't. And what I started realizing was that women were experts at disassociating from an emotionally uninhabitable world, and they would simply leave their body. They would leave this feeling realm. They would disassociate in order to, survive. And so coming back to the body and learning how to stand and be embodied and to look at, the world and all of our fears and really like head on and stand in the truth of who we are is really what we're here to do. And so as I started to do so many of the parts work, of meeting the parts of myself that I had exiled out of my body, that I had kind of kicked out of the garden and said, like, you're not worthy, you're too much, you're not enough, whatever the story was for these little parts of myself, it was really starting to realize and recognize that what I was doing was soul retrieval and starting to invite these fragmented parts of myself back home. And now I do that with women through a creative process I call intentional creativity. I do it through life coaching as well and leadership coaching. But I started about 18 months ago. I realized that there was a part of myself, the artist part, that wanted to come back online. And so she was like, remember me? I went into meditation and she was standing there in overalls and she had a paintbrush. And she was kind of like, remember me? And I was like, oh my gosh, like I had applied to art school growing up because I had done poorly in school all growing up. And my dad, bless his heart, was like really supportive, but also very patriarchal. So he said, you're never going to meet a man to support you in art school. And I thought, well, who needs a man? Who needs a husband? Like, what? I'm just 19 years old. And but I had gotten all these scholarships to art school and I wasn't able to go. So here I am at 54 years old and I'm sitting in meditation. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like, is this part of me telling me to go back to art school? So I always look for synchronicities. And literally about 2 weeks later, in my email box comes a 6 month certification to do something called medicine painting. And it's for coaches who want to incorporate art and intentional creativity into their practice. And I was like, oh my gosh, exactly what I basically ordered from the universe. And so I did the 6 month certification, and then I went on and continued doing more coursework and now have started integrating intentional creativity into my coaching with women. And it has been so amazing because it allows women to experience the emotions of creating. And as they meet their creator selves, which is what we're designed to do as women, we also come up against the shadow parts of ourselves that still are in the trance of unworthiness.
Wow. And you know what? It's interesting. I always thought I was horrible at art. And it wasn't until my husband made a comment. I was doing my makeup one day, and then he's like, you're an artist. I said, I draw stick figures. What a please. And he's like, no, you actually blend your colors nicely with your eyeshadow. I'm like, oh, I was surprised he actually recognized that, first off. Second off, I was like, oh, you're right.
Oh
I
my
am
gosh.
an artist.
And Gina, a podcasting is an art form. You know,
Right.
we realize when we podcast, like I didn't know that about myself. I didn't know, for example, that I was an artist in creating conversations, that I
Right.
was an artist of curiosity, that I was an artist in branding, right? Like you look at your beautiful brand behind you, Shine Within. There are so many forms of expression. And so while I might use tools like painting and collage and metacognitive drawing, it's just as easy to apply that to branding and to, as I work with many entrepreneurial women, to help them kind of like channel their creativity into their brand, into like what they're up to next. Because as women, we're constantly going through processes of death and rebirth. Now, another round of mothering, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a side of you, there's a part of you that must die in order for this next child's mother to be reborn. And so we're constantly doing that, whether it's through actual pregnancy or through an identity death, where we have to kind of say goodbye to the old self and welcome in a new part of us that's ready to shine.
Yes, it's so interesting that you say that, because recently in podcast I was expressing my sadness because I'm like, I'm going to have to pause on my podcast and my coaching business because I'm going to be taking care of this baby and I want to be taking care of this baby full time. All the other kids, well, besides the younger one, but my oldest one had babysitters, and I don't think I really spent much time with him when he was a baby. And yeah, and so now I'm actually looking forward to being a mom all over again, starting brand new. And so, yes, it's going to be on pause, on hold for a while, but and maybe I won't ever return to it. Who knows? I don't know.
And Gina, I call it a sacred pause because it's in the pause too that we really kind of we get to kind of like reassess, breathe, take a break from all of the laboring we've been doing, right? And just be where we need to be in the moment. And that's another thing that's really challenging for a lot of women to do. And like you said, when you look back, right, you have an opportunity where, you didn't so much do it in the past. I know that was the same for myself. I have adult children now, and I look back and I was like, oh my gosh, I missed a huge part of their childhood because I was so busy trying to prove myself to be the entrepreneur. So to have another chance is just a beautiful thing. And you may decide, I can do both or I can do all of this. But it gets to be kind of from a different place of awareness.
Absolutely. And going back to embodiment, I noticed for myself when I first got sober, I was so disconnected from my body that I needed to get back into my body. And I just noticed like practices like dance, yoga. I think I was also working out early morning just to start loving my body again because it was neglected and hated on, I guess, for so many years. Can you go ahead and just talk about how embodiment is actually directly connected to personal freedom and leadership for women?
Oh my gosh, it's everything. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So I think I mentioned to you that I'm really into human design. And one of the things that really helped me was to learn that I'm an emotional generator. And for those listening, you can easily go and look up your human design. There's so many free sites. Just Google human design chart, free human design chart, and you can download your own. But it was almost like, oh my gosh, no wonder. I was like, aha, eureka moment. Like I'm an emotional generator. Not everybody's emotional. There's actually people called non-emotionals. But the interesting thing is, non-emotionals usually feel 10 times what the emotionals feel. So it's a whole field of study. But one thing about my own emotional landscape is I was so afraid of my emotions. I was so afraid of feeling. And as women, in our world, in our inverted world, that is called a negative feminine trait. And so we're programmed to think emotions are negative. Emotions mean there's something wrong with us. Emotions are weak. I mean, go ahead and fill in the blank, right? And actually, it's one of the strongest, most beautiful qualities that we have. And with women, what we want to work on isn't so much about stopping the emotions, but discerning what the emotions are here to tell us, because there's so much wisdom in our emotion. And so, what we want to do is we want to learn the tools, teachings, and practices of what I call embodied feminine wisdom. And what we do when we're in an upset, and what I like to do is I often leverage on the teachings of a woman by the name of Mama Gina, and some of your listeners will have heard of her. But she has a practice called swamping, and it helps a woman kind of get out her emotions, get out her rage, get out her anger, but also tune into, once that wave has passed, her joy, her divinity, her, I call it sacred rage, because when rage kind of like rages out, it becomes sacred rage. Like there's something actually incredibly beautiful about rage once a woman has kind of like gotten to the place of like, this is powerful, right? And once she stops denying that power or denying that rage or denying that anger or grief, whatever it is, right? She can actually sit in herself and be like, oh, that was actually like refreshing. She can come to a different perception of what that emotion is actually here to teach her. But when she's constantly pushing it away or pressing it down or saying, like, now's a really inconvenient time, not now, she becomes full, but with so in art we call it emptying. Okay, like we have to empty onto the canvas to empty out all of what's not us in order to fill ourselves with what is us. And oftentimes all of those old suppressed emotions are coming from childhood wounds, they're coming from misunderstandings, they're coming from unresolved upsets, they're coming from all of these places that we've never turned to just kind of look at the parts of us And this is where, it kind of like starts to make sense to women. It's like every single part of us that's holding an old emotion has an age and a memory. And so as we start turning towards those parts, it can be overwhelming without a guide. So what I like to do is kind of guide the woman back to her body. Okay, where are you feeling the emotion? Where is it in your body? She might say, it's in my tummy. Okay, let's go inside. What is the feeling in your tummy? Is there a color in your tummy? Do you have a memory in your tummy? Right? And let her kind of like start to see what it's like to actually sit with that discomfort and know that it's not going to kill her. It's not going to annihilate her. It's not going to, it's like there to actually teach her something.
Well, that is very powerful because like I was mentioning to you earlier in this podcast, we were told not to feel, otherwise
Hmm.
we'd be looked at as weak. But I want to tell you something, like, and all my listeners know this. I don't know if it's probably hormonal, but I've been feeling like I needed to cry like almost every day. And then old Gina would have been like, "You cry, baby, you suck. Why are you doing that? That's not good." But now I'm like, you know what? I need this cry. I don't know why, but I'm going to cry. And I feel so
Yes.
much better afterward. I used to have a lot of anger issues before, hence with drinking made it a lot worse.
Hmm.
And I had to learn ways to unleash that anger elsewhere. And so a lot of it went to the gym and running and just releasing, or even hiking up all the way to the summit and then just screaming, getting everything out, because we do experience a lot of trauma in our childhood. We do experience challenges here on earth, and it's how we respond to it, and at least have awareness on it. Yeah, where is it showing up in our bodies? That is a good point. And pay attention
Yeah.
and then observe, right?
Well, and Gina, what I love about what you're pointing to is that, as anger and all of that softens, it does kind of soften into something that we can then release. And tears, I don't know if you know of Veda Austin's work, but again, for your listeners, Veda Austin is this really powerful, like she's been studying water and the waters of our bodies and how we store memories. And she's actually does this experiment where she freezes different waters. She freezes tears too. And she can ask the water. She speaks to the water and the water freezes an image for her in a hieroglyph and shows her what the actual tears are all about. Like it's amazing. And so she's done several experiments, like tons and tons of experiments. And so again, like these tears all hold wisdom, and there's different kinds of tears. And with everything going on in the world, wouldn't your grief be so appropriate and approved of? I mean, it really just shows for those of us that are tender and those of us that are able to actually weep for what's going on in the world. I mean, that is to me just a huge sign of strength of how human we are, how embodied we actually are, because it's such an appropriate response to what's happening in the world right now.
100%. And that leads to what you were discussing about earlier, saying yes to the mess. Like, yes, things are so messy in our lives, and but say yes to it. I remember my old business coach always asked us, "Are you guys ready to take some messy action?"
Yes, because that's what it is. I'm like, oh my gosh, because it's also so many of us are recovering from the other P word, perfectionism.
Right.
Right. And so it's like, oh my gosh, say yes to the mess is constantly reminding me, like, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be Serena Williams, every time I like pick up a racket for the first time or pick up a paintbrush. I don't have to be Georgia O'Keeffe. I can just be this messy, experimental artist with my life, and just have fun. And that's the truth. Like those of us that can stand embodied and face the world and all of its sorrows can also do the same with all of the beauty and magic and life there is in the world. It's like to ultimately kind of come into the integrated masculine and feminine is to be able to hold those paradoxes and experience the breadth and depth of life.
Yes. And then I heard you also speaking about the dark night of the soul. Can you go ahead and share and talk a little bit about this period? As painful as it is, I've experienced the dark night of the soul, I think mostly obviously one time well, there's been so many times actually. I don't think it's just
I
one
know. It doesn't
time.
just happen
I
once.
was like, wait,
No.
is it multiple times? But can you go ahead and explain how it can actually be the most transformational part of our lives as well?
Yes. Okay, so I often love to refer to a myth when helping women kind of understand what a dark night of the soul is. And the myth is called the myth of Inanna, and it's an old Sumerian myth. It's actually ancient. And are you familiar with it, Gina?
I know Sumerian, but
Okay,
yeah, this is new
okay,
though. I love this.
okay. So we could also look at Mary Magdalene, actually, and let me just hold those two together for a moment. Inanna and Mary Magdalene. Um, both of them had what's called a dark night. For Mary Magdalene in this inverted world, they called her a prostitute. Well, we've proven she was not a prostitute. And it was said that Jesus exorcised her of seven demons. In fact, I'm almost sure that she exorcised herself of those demons because she was a priestess. And the inward journey is the journey that Inanna took and is the journey that Mary Magdalene took. And in order to meet your true self, you have to descend into your unconscious. And in the myth, the story of Inanna is that she was living on the surface of life. She was, doing all of the things we women do on the surface of life, but she hadn't really checked in to her dark sister. And her dark sister was herself that lived in the unconscious. It was all of the abandoned parts of herself that she had exiled in order to survive up on the surface of life. And so Inanna listened. She put her ear to the great below and she could hear her sister crying for her true self. And so Inanna descended. And as she descended through the seven gates, the guardians of the gates, made her disrobe, beginning with her crown, then taking off her robe, then taking off all her jewels. And as she went through each gate, she would say, "But why? But why? But why?" And each guardian of the gate would say, "Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. You are not to question the ways of the underworld." And that's what it was like going into the underworld. It was like I didn't understand what was happening. I had so many questions because I was still such a wounded maiden. We're all wounded maidens until we make the descent into the underworld. And it's in the underworld that we reclaim the true parts of ourselves, the what shadow parts that often have gifts to give us that we can't use until we've become initiated. And so, as we travel and journey inside of ourselves, we find these parts and we reintegrate these parts. And then, as we ascend, we have less and less questions. We're no longer asking questions because now we have wisdom. And so, going into the underworld is very much good news. A lot of women think they're going crazy. Nope, you're just waking up. Nope. Actually, in order to ascend, you must first descend. And like you said, you will descend multiple times because we don't just go on one journey. And as I said before, we often have to go through multiple, just like a snake sheds its skin, we have to go through multiple shedding seasons. And so that's really what I have to offer. And of course, it is a beautiful story. And I take women through a group journey called Unbecoming. And in that group experience, I teach them the myth of Inanna. And it's over a 6-month period. And it's a beautiful, beautiful journey because so many women are then able to understand what true sisterhood is, because we recontextualize what it means to be with other women. And what we teach them in this course Unbecoming is that yes, you're going to look messy and you're going to be unbecoming. And that of course was used against us when we were little girls. It's like, don't sit like that, that's unbecoming for a lady, right? What we want to do is reclaim that with full approval. We want to say yes to the mess, and we want to learn how to celebrate each other in our messiness and not compete with each other anymore as women. We want to start celebrating each other. We want to start realizing that we can shine, and just by daring to shine, we're not taking away somebody else's shine, you know? And these are all of the lessons and teachings, tools, and practices of what I call embodied feminine wisdom. And in that practice, Gina, like just like you said earlier, we dance, we swamp, we move, we breathe, right? I bring in special teachers to teach women how to breathe, how to use breathing as a way to kind of get through the discomfort of emotions. But really, it's about re-inhabiting ourselves and reconnecting to the divinity that's already and is always within us.
Wow, that was so beautiful. I'm gonna need to get a little sound bite of that from this podcast here.
Well, thank you
Now,
for inviting me to share about it.
I
Yeah.
didn't know about this. And wow. This is why I love bringing on guests like yourself, because I learn and I'm sure my listeners are learning as well. So thank you for that. Now, is this tie into your Revelation project?
Yeah, well, I call it so, yes. I call it the Revelation Project because as we reveal our unconscious selves, we have revelations about ourselves and the world. So I had almost 4 years of a podcast with over almost 190 episodes where I'm
Mm.
interviewing all kinds of guests, just like you are, entrepreneurial women, women who've studied Anana, women who've studied the sacred feminine. I've had many men on there too, but there's like a whole library of pretty much anything that has everything to do with the feminine or anything that was taboo or off limits in our society. So that's what I call the Revelation Project podcast. And then really what I often say is that each of us are doing our own revelation project. And it's all about coming back to the body to reconnect to like our true GPS. And as we reconnect, we start having revelation after revelation. And women are the oracles of our world. And if we're not embodied, we can't access that true oracle within. And so it really is the most important journey we'll ever make as women, is that journey back to the body. Because even when we've lost our way, the body knows the way home.
Yes. I had to die to myself multiple times, but the ultimate death was one in 2017 and the other was in 2020, where I was like, enough with the hustle and grind work. Let's just
Mhm.
focus on your passions, what lights you up. And then that's what then got me into business, coaching business and then podcasting and everything. And then I was like, oh, this is what I love doing. And it didn't feel like work anymore. Although, don't get me wrong, I still do massage therapy and I've still employed at my job, but like on call. And plus, I'm going to be going on maternity leave, so I won't be there for a while. But I don't think I'm going to be going back anytime soon because I didn't like that traffic. Because that was another thing. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't want traffic. Why do I have to put myself in this? I don't want to.
Yeah,
And
there's so much permission, right? You started giving yourself permission, right? To just be like,
yes,
no, not that. No, no, it doesn't light me up. It doesn't make me shine from within, right? And
yes.
that's what you, like you named your podcast and what you're kind of all about is that inner spark, like what is that thing that's going to make us shine from within? And when we're shining from that place, there's just not a better feeling in the world. And that's when we shed all of the conditioning, not at once, but certainly in layers. It's like, oh, every time I kind of like have another revelation, it's another shedding. It's another shedding of being the pretty, pleasing, polite, performative perfectionist, right? And I'm done with that. And it's coming back to a place of full self approval, of saying yes to the mess. I get to be messy and magnificent. It's really unifying those paradoxes and coming to the I am both and. I am messy and I am magnificent, and it's okay.
Yes, 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 yes. I love that. Well, Monica, I can talk to you forever, but I'm sure our listeners are trying to already find you on Google or somewhere. Can you please drop your details where they can connect with you?
Absolutely. You can come to join. So it's www.jointherevelation.com. And if you want to get on my mailing list, you can do so. I have a free gift called the Woman's Bill of Rights. And you can download that. And I always invite women to write your own Bill of Rights. And that usually starts you having some revelations that you might not have had before, because it's really kind of a manifesto about full permission and full self-approval. And so I wrote it for myself after I came out of the underworld to remind myself of what I learned as I traveled and journeyed through that experience. And so I welcome all of your guests to come and join me there. So thank you, Gina. This has been such an amazing podcast, and I have no headache anymore. Isn't that funny? Like I
Mine's gone too.
I know, I know. I think we just needed to connect.
Totally. But last question for women listening who feel stuck in like striving, proving, or conforming, what is one simple but yet powerful step they can go ahead and take to begin reclaiming their voice and, of course,
Yeah.
their authenticity?
Okay, so the very first thing you can do is just say, I'm stuck and I approve.
So simple, right?
So simple. It's like, guess what? You get to be stuck.
Yeah.
You get to be stuck. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Be stuck. Oh my gosh, let me celebrate how stuck I am. I am so damn stuck. Oh my gosh. And I approve. And it just like start getting that muscle going of self-approval. It's like, I lost my shit earlier. I approve.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not about condoning our behavior, but it's about approving and starting to break the habitual, like, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? Blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, that is just head trash. And that is conditioning. And how you can start to really interrupt that programming. We interrupt this programming with a brand new, like, I approve, I approve, I approve.
I approve this message.
I
Yes.
approve this message. Completely. And that is my single number one tip for right now, and there's so many simple but profound tools like that. So feel free, anyone that would like to do a little coaching work, I offer free consultations. We can just meet and see if we'd be a good fit together, and then we can decide what you want to do and how you want to move forward. And that's as easy as it gets.
Wow. Well, thank you so, 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 so much for being on my show. Yes, my headache is gone, and I'm just grateful for this moment here. So thank you so much.
Me too. It was an honor, and thanks to all of your listeners.